Today, we're taking a deeper look at compressors. More specifically, I want to talk about some common mistakes that guitarists make when using compressors and address those of you who may say that you hate using a compressor with your guitar. I find in a lot of cases when people feel this way, they're maybe not using it correctly, they have it dialed in wrong, or just maybe haven't found the right one. We're going to talk about some more advanced techniques when using a compressor with your guitar and just how to dial in a compressor to get a great sound. Now, to do this, we're going to be using this compressor from Empress. This is the MKII version. The reason why I want to use this is because it packs a ton of features in a small box, and I think I can really demonstrate some of these concepts really well with it. I will go ahead and tell you guys that Empress did send this to me for free, which is why this video is marked paid promotion, but I'm not being paid to make this video or say good things about it. I just really do think this is a great compressor that has a lot of great features. You'll be hearing some clips of that compressor throughout this video, but it's not really a demo. We're more just talking about these ideas behind compressors and using them for great guitar sounds. All right, let's get into it. Some common arguments against using a compressor with your guitar are that it robs your dynamics, or you experience a loss of high end. Maybe the compressor is noisy. Some of these are definitely valid, but in a lot of circumstances, I find that people aren't setting their compressors up properly, they don't have them dialed in right, or maybe they're just using the wrong compressor. Now, in this video, I'm more so talking about general leveling techniques with a compressor and not something very drastic or specific like setting a compressor for country chicken picking. That's a very specific sound and not really what I'm talking about in this video. A few years back, I realized or experienced the importance of a general leveling compressor. I was borrowing a friend's little pale green compressor. I think that's the name from BJFE. And that's a pretty extreme compressor in my opinion. But I threw it on my board. I really liked how it sounded, and I had a rehearsal. And in that rehearsal, it was recorded and I listened back, and I loved how my guitar sat in the mix. It just kind of was locked in the mix. I could hear everything that I was doing, even though there was a lot going on musically. And even though I've definitely used other compressors and dialed that back a little bit, it really showed me the importance of using a compressor to keep my guitar up front in the mix and sounding really great. This leads me to the first mistake I think people make when dialing in a compressor, and that's that they're listening to it in solo. They're just playing guitar by themselves and dialing in their compressor settings. And in a lot of cases, we really need to hear it in a mix to see how it's allowing our guitar to sit in a mix. It might feel a little more affected. It might be more noticeable when we're playing solo, but when we get in a mix, it's really going to help it sit well and sound great. I want to explain the concept behind this a little more in detail because I think this is something that a lot of guitarists don't understand or get wrong. I think a lot of people have the idea that compressors bring down your peaks, that they're bringing down your signal. Anything that's loud that would jump out, it's bringing that down. Now, while this is happening, the bigger idea here is that it's bringing things that are quieter up in volume. That's why some compressors can be noisy or introduce more noise, because you're bringing up your signal. You're bringing up the amount of gain. So what happens is, say this is your full range of signal here, we're compressing, so anything that hits that compressor is being brought down, but then we're using our output level or our gain to bring that all up. So our dynamic range here is less, but anything that might get lost in the mix that we might not hear as well, we're bringing that up. And so that makes sure that all of those intricacies, all of those little things that you might not hear in the context of a mix are being brought up in level and can be heard more clearly. Another mistake that people make when it comes to compressors is using the wrong compressor, or at least using a bad combination. Maybe you play a Les Paul and you plug into a Dynacomp. Even at the most minimal settings, it's going to be very squishy and very compressed. It's probably going to feel unnatural, and yeah, you might hate it. This might work for some things, but if you're just looking for something that's going to generally even out your sound or provide a natural sound, this isn't going to give you that. There are some things to look for when you are looking for a compressor that's going to work well for just general leveling. I think some of those things are a mix or a blend control. This gives you the ability to blend in your dry, uncompressed signal. An attack control can be very useful. We'll talk about those ideas here in a little bit, as well as an input gain control. This makes sure that if you have a guitar with a lot of output or higher output pickups, like PAFs or humbuckers, that you're able to adjust how hard it's hitting that compressor, and it's just going to ensure that you can get a more transparent style compression. There are a couple controls on the Empress that even go a step further, and that's a ratio control and a sidechain switch. Both of these are going to allow you to dial in super transparent sounds with this compressor and use it in a variety of different scenarios. We'll take a closer look at those controls in just a minute, but first I want to talk about another one that is commonly misunderstood, and that's the attack control. Now, a lot of guitar compressors don't even have this, but it can make a huge difference when dialing in a great tone. Essentially, what the attack control does is it determines how quickly the compressor is reacting to your playing. If you set it too low, then it can make your sound a little darker. It can make it feel a little lifeless. So I actually like doing a slower attack time. This gives us a real punchy sound and can add a lot of clarity. Using a slower attack time, we can really glue our guitar in the mix, but it might feel a little lifeless. It might feel a little unnatural. This is where a mix control can come in super handy. We can blend in a little of our unaffected sound and just make it feel natural and good to us. When it comes to compression, a little goes a long way, and one big mistake that guitarists make is over-compressing or using too much compression. Now, this isn't all their fault. A lot of guitar compressors, even at their most minimal settings, compress your signal a good bit. So it's important to find a compressor that gives you the flexibility to set up more subtle tones. We've already talked about a couple of controls that allow you to do this, an attack control and a mix or blend knob. But there are other controls to look for so that you can get more subtle tones, but also experience the benefit of compression, punchiness, more sustain, just a general leveling effect. Let's take a closer look at a few controls on this compressor, or controls that you might see on other compressors. The first one I want to talk about is this input gain. Now, this is basically a way to dial in the compressor for whatever guitar you're using. Something like a Les Paul is going to have way more output, and so naturally that's going to hit the compressor harder. Being able to turn that input gain down is a way to get more subtle compression. Now, this is going to be labeled different things on different compressors, compressors. On the Dynacomp, it's labeled sensitivity. On some compressors, it's just labeled compression. But essentially, that's a way to dial in more or less compression. Most of these pedals have what we call a fixed threshold, or the point at which compression starts. And so by adjusting the input gain or the quote-unquote amount of compression, we're basically adjusting how much level is being sent to the compressor. Something like a Dynacomp is going to have a lower threshold and is going to compress sooner, whereas other pedals will have a higher threshold. In a way, it almost feels like they have higher headroom, but it's not really that. It's the point at which the compression starts. But when that threshold is higher, then we can get less compressed tones, or we at least have more flexibility to not hit that compression circuit as soon. The next control that we haven't talked about is the release. Now, you'll notice on most of these clips, I've kept that around noon. I'm not going to go too much into this control because it's probably one of the last controls I would worry about if you are new to compressors. But just know that as you turn that up, you're going to get more sustain. You might have to compensate with your output. It's just basically that compressor is holding on to your signal a little longer. A control that we've started to see on some guitar compressors is a tone control, and this just allows you to brighten or darken up your tone. Sometimes compression will darken your tone, like if you use quicker attack times, it's going to darken it so we can brighten it with that tone control, or vice versa. Some of those longer attack times are going to really emphasize the transient, which is going to make it maybe feel a little brighter. So we can use that tone knob to darken that up a touch and make it feel more like our uncompressed signal. The switch we have over here on the left, this is our ratio control, and that's 2-to-1, 4-to-1, and 10-to-1. 10-to-1 is going to be something like a Dynacomp. That's pretty heavy compression. Some would even call it limiting. Basically, the idea here is that for every 10 decibels that hits the compressor, it's only letting it go up 1 decibel. Now, that's once you hit the threshold of the compressor, once the compressor is actually kicking in. Those other two ratios, 2-to-1 and 4-to-1, are going to be much more subtle. You're going to have a lot more dynamic range, and it's going to feel more natural, or at least more like an uncompressed signal, because it's not working as hard, it's not bringing down your dynamics quite as much. The last control I want to talk about is this side chain. This has an external side chain that you can plug in here at the top. I'm not going to go into that, but it also has a high pass filter that's built in. You have two different settings, 120 and 240. This is not something we see a ton on guitar compressors. The idea here is that it basically keeps your low frequencies from affecting the compressor, and this is going to make it not pump as much. It's going to feel more transparent. A lot of times our low frequencies can kind of hit the compressor circuit and make it pump more, make it work harder than maybe it really needs to. So this is a way, again, to just dial in more transparent, more natural tones. Actually, I do want to talk about one other thing too, and that's something that's super handy on this compressor, and that's the gain reduction meter. You guys have seen that throughout this video, being able to tell how much you're actually compressing. This is super handy because sometimes it can be hard, especially when we're using a mix control, to tell how much compression is actually happening, and especially if you're new to compressors and your ears aren't quite trained to hear that. This is a good visual representation of how much your signal is being compressed, how hard you're hitting the compressor. And that's just going to, again, kind of help you start to hear that a little better and help you dial in those tones. There are lots of ways to use compressors, whether you're just using it for a general evening, maybe you're using it for a boost or a sustain boost for single note lines, maybe you're just using it to shape your sound tonally. Whatever the case, understanding a lot of these concepts and ideas and finding the right compressor will help you have a better, more professional sound. If you found yourself hating compressors in the past, I would definitely encourage you to dive a little deeper. Maybe try a different compressor. I think that your sound will be better overall for it. That's going to do it for this video. As always, thank you for watching. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below, and definitely check out the links in the description for more info on the Empress compressor, as well as links to my speaker IRs, HX Stomp presets, camper profiles, my course on creating and layering parts, as well as some Amazon links to some things that I use and love. Clicking those are always to help support the channel and show your support for what I'm doing. So thank you. All right, until next time, I'll see you out there.